selling tangible personal property or renting taxable services in the city of Brecken, Missouri at a retail rate of 1% of the receipts from the sale of retail all tangible personal property or taxable services within said city, and if such personal services are subject to taxation by the state of Missouri under provisions section 114.10 to 114.527 RSMO, pursuant to the authority granted by the subject and provisions of section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO, and providing submission to this ordinance to the qualified voters of said city for their approval of the general election called to be held on said city on November 3rd, 2020. First reading, bill number 2011.
Thank you, sir. I make a motion that we suspend the rules for the second reading.
Thank you. Is there any objection to suspending the rules?
No.
All in favor of suspending the rules?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Second reading.
Bill number 2011 is ordinance number 1044, an ordinance imposing tax for general revenue purposes of all sellers for the privilege of engaging in business selling tangible personal property or renting taxable services in the city of Brecken, Missouri at retail rate of 1% on the receipts of sales of retail all tangible personal property or taxable services within retail within said city, if such property and services are subject to taxation by the state of Missouri under the provisions of section 114.10 to 114.527 RSMO, pursuant to the authority granted by and subject to the provisions of section 94.500 to 94.550 RSMO, and providing for special of this ordinance to the qualified voters of said city for their approval at the general election called to be held on said city on November 3rd, 2020. Second reading Council Bill 2011, or 2011.
Thank you. Given that we've had our first and second reading, can we do take a vote to, assuming there's a motion to approve that ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And any discussion?
I have something to say, but I just didn't want to be the first person all the time. So if no one else has anything to say, then I'm obviously going to say anything. So obviously, the first thing I'll say is our role is to submit to the will of the people, not to impose our will onto the people. With that said, there's two more things. One is, I think it needs to be recognized that this board's reckless spending from 2012 through 2018 is what caused this financial crisis. And I, myself, and maybe it's happened, but I haven't heard anybody take responsibility for how we got here. And I think if this board were to take responsibility and admit that this board made mistakes or made maybe bad decisions or something, I think that would go a long way with the citizens in saying, okay, we'll help you out. I think part of the problem with the citizens is this board won't take responsibility for getting us here in the first place. That's the first thing I'd say. The second one is like a minute long, and it's what I said last time. The voters have already said no. They've said no twice already, and now we're asking them a third time. And like I said before, I think that's a slap in the face of democracy. I really do. I really think we should be ashamed of what we're doing today because the people have already spoken. And that's all I got to say.
Well, you can be ashamed if you want, but I'm not ashamed, because I know what the city needs, and this is one way that we can do it to help the citizens of Butler, to keep the city open and provide the services that they deserve.
I think one of the things I'd like to point out too is this would be a general revenue fund. I don't spend time obsessing over Facebook, but I know Mr. Coley and some of them have put together a new page, and I was reading on there that one individual was pretty adamant they didn't want to go to the general fund, but that's how we fund our police department. So if you want to keep the police department open and local, we're going to have to fund the general fund. And right now, as we work through the budget, fortunately, we're able to take we pay public works out of water, sewer, and streets, but the police, there's no place else to get that money from. So, a lot of folks don't like the proposal Mr. Holler put on the board, but we're going to have to make a decision whether we're going to fund operations or what we're going to do, and that money, just by the way the budget's structured, that money goes to the general revenue fund, goes to pay the police. So, all that being said, Joe,
Actually, I got a few things if you don't mind.
oh, please.
Okay, I'll do my little spiel. And then, like I said before, it's still not an educational issue. I don't even think it's a money issue. You know, there'll be a few people that's a little tight, but it's such a small amount, it doesn't really affect you individually that much. It's 100% a trust issue. They don't trust the board, they don't trust the city. And I think doing things like this today doesn't help our look at all. I think it's bad. So if the real goal is to pass this 1%, I think you'd be better off tabling it, bringing it back in the spring and April. I might even support it in April. Because then there's time for us to prove to the citizens that we can be good stewards of the finances, right? If we use logic over emotion, I think that's the right play, especially with it's a big general election, big turnout. That's not gonna bode well either. So I think better off, if you wanna wait, it'll probably pass. This time, probably not. And there's no argument that we need it. I think everybody would agree the city needs it. So, but I don't know if it'll get done.
How are we gonna demonstrate in 5 months' time that we're good stewards of the money?
Well, I think the Budget and Finance Committee has done a good job with the budget for next year, and there's some things in there. And then there's some also things that we can do that could be discussed that we shore up and curtail any additional spending. I think just doing that, that's what the city wants, that's what they want to
Spending
see.
is gonna control itself because there's nothing we can spend.
Yeah, there's no money to spend for additional spending.
Well, that hasn't stopped the board for the last 5 years on
Well,
different
this
projects.
is that board, that argument, keep looking backwards in the rearview mirror, doesn't fly with me. This is a new board, we gotta look that way.
Well, we
not
need
that
to
way.
prove that to the citizens, they don't see that. I know that like, 4 of the 6 in the mayor's new, which he's doing a good job, but John Q. Public doesn't really know that, or they think, hey, you're just gonna be like everybody else.
If
That's
they don't
you're
know
just the
that-
same alderman.
If
You
they
just
don't know
need-
that, that flies in the face of your education argument, that they're not, that they're educated.
Well, we need to prove and earn our trust. I mean, if you gotta be earned first.
Yeah, I think, I'm new to the board, and, so I'm just kind of bringing new ideas as best I can. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as aldermen, we need to be out there hitting the streets, we need to be out there. If it's an education issue, which I know you say you don't think it is, but it might be, it may not be, but if we're out there hitting the streets in our wards, giving the correct information, this is what money that we had from last year, and this is the projected money if this was to pass for this year, and we kind of have a goal set in place and where that money's gonna go. Yes, it's gonna go to the general fund, but are we gonna spend it in the police department? Are we gonna fix these roads out on Hudson Street? I mean, you name it, there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. I know Alderman Haller was talking about the drainage issue in Ward 3 out there. You know, so there's a lot of things that need to be addressed, and if we can relay that to the public, who may not know, they may not know, they may not have internet, they may not have the ability to come up here, who knows? But if we were to go out, hit the streets and say, hey, this is the money that we got from the previous, if the sales tax passes, based on these numbers, this was the extra money that would come into the city approximately, of course, if we can't 100% put it in. But I think that hit the streets as the aldermen, putting faces to the people is what's gonna need to be done. We're gonna have to get out there, hit the streets and let people know what it is we're trying to do, build that trust factor, because we could sit here all day long with the same people from every meeting, and they know us, but half the town don't know who we are. So
I know I've talked to a couple of my constituents in Ward 3 who have voted no twice, and they've even said, yeah, if you can push it back, give something of trust, a little build-up, they would flip their vote. I did that first, I voted no twice, and I don't trust the board. I'd like a little more time to show that we're gonna make good, solid, sound decisions. I'm on board, I'm in, but it takes time, it's not gonna happen overnight. We gotta earn that, that's my opinion, if it matters.
I don't disagree with the trust issue. I may or may not agree with the time limit that you're saying that we should push it back, but if you've been really watching, then you should, and like I have, because I don't know if I've been in there, yeah, maybe, not even a full 2 years, but, our new mayor has gone to great lengths and hours, on the budget money, and even went back years, and he's been doing a lot of things to bring in, inventive ways to bring money back into the city, and I welcome him to tell you all the things, but you can't count on both hands the things he's been trying to do to bring in money to the city. And this is one of his ideas, and I think it's great. I mean, the money's got to be there one way or the other, and he's doing all he can. And I think the issue as far as the vote, I believe, this is my opinion, is a trust and an education. First, the trust is that they may not trust us. The second is we have to make them believe that we really do need the money. So I think it's both. And without getting out there and talking, and that's what I intend to do, and my ward member intends Randy and I started it, that's why I believe it is that way, because I talked to some of my people. And it was a trust and it was an education issue. So that, I'm not just, this isn't just my belief, this is my belief based on going down one full street.
I'd say most people know, I mean, that the city's in financial trouble. You drive down the streets, they drive down them every day. They're not the greatest. Street signs, there's some you can't even read because they're so old and sunburned that we can't replace. So I think people know that part. But again, and just the whole thing, even if everybody agreed right now to put this on and we think it's great, this election may not be the best avenue for that. I've heard a couple people up here even say that, it's like, yeah, I don't know, there's gonna be a huge turnout, it's probably not gonna vote well. Then we lose one of our arrows, right? Then do we come back a fourth time in the spring? Seems like we should save one in our quiver for a better time. That's all I'm saying. Then it will pass or have a better chance. Why just fire a Hail Mary now because it didn't happen 2 times? But I'm just one of them.
Thank you, sir. Is there anything else? Now we'll take the vote. Roll call.
Alderman Butts?
Yes.
Alderman Jones?
Aye.
Alderman Ross?
No.
Alderman Wilcox?
Yes.
Alderman Lewis? Aye. Alderman Hollow?
No.
We'll take it back. 4-2. Well, that being the agenda for the day, I think 15 minutes, that's not terrible. I know it disrupted your weekend a little bit, but I do appreciate that. Joe, do you have anything else that you need from us, or Mr.
I
Mauer?
think you signed it up.
So we don't come back on Monday then?
So you got the gift of time, thank you, everyone, for that as well. If not, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move it.